She thinks the old man can't understand, she says in Mandarin, clear as the rain against the stairwell window. Just a burden. I don't move. I let the word press into me like a thumb on a bruise. Then I step into the doorway, meet her eyes and answer, in her language, steady and precise. I heard you clearly. 2 sentences. That's all it takes to make the hallway go quiet enough that I can hear the elevator cables hum. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. It's November 12th in Ballard, Seattle, the kind of gray that turns the sidewalks into wet paper. I'm 68 and my knees count each step. Mei-Lin holds her phone at chest level on speaker, a cousin giggling somewhere in Mandarin. She recovers fast. "Joke," she says in English, all sugar, and slides the phone into her coat pocket. I nod like a slow metronome and keep walking to my condo, the place my wife and I paid off in July 2021. $489,000 and not a penny owed to anyone. This house isn't a trophy. It's my pension. It's the one thing that makes my sleep light enough to carry into morning. Inside, the kitchen clock ticks like a patient interrogator. There's a folded paper on the counter, household expenses, $2,800 penciled in heavy numbers, my name written where Daniel's should be. No note, no receipt, just hunger with handwriting. I lay the bill flat, run a finger under the 8 like it might smear, and slide it into my spiral notebook, the one where my late wife's grocery lists still live between pages like pressed leaves. Beneath the bill, I write 3 words in Mandarin with a cheap blue pen. Jijang, Naixin, Bianjai, ledger, patience, boundaries. The oven timer dings somewhere in their unit and stops. Nobody calls out. Silence becomes a character and sits with me at the table. When my son comes by later, he smells like rain and one of those department store colognes that try too hard to be cedar. "Dad," he says, "May didn't mean anything. Please don't make this awkward." He never looks at the notebook. He never asks why a $2,800 bill needs my signature when the condo is mine. He kisses my forehead, the way he did once when his mother was dying, and leaves the door a little open, like he might be back in a second. I stand, walk to the window, and thumb the groove in the sill my wife worried smooth over 25 winters. The building across the street blinks a neon noodle bowl on and off, like Morse code, for people who love late dinners. I think about the language that carried me through the 80s, back when I hauled sacks of jasmine rice off trucks on Jackson Street and learned enough Mandarin to buy, sell, and not get cheated on a crate. That language hasn't left me. It's just been sleeping under the bed, waiting to sit up. At breakfast the next morning, the orange pill bottle, metoprolol, has migrated behind a wall of instant noodles. "For safety?" Mei-Lin says, smiling. I take the bottle back and place it in the sun square on the counter where I always keep it. She watches the move, watches me. "We're planning a big Lunar New Year dinner in February," she says, light skipping along the sentence like a stone on a lake. "You'll come, yes?" I look at her for the length of a breath, then 2. "I'll bring a story," I say. In the notebook I add a date under the 2800, November 12. I underline it twice. My hand is steady. My pulse is not. I make tea in the dented kettle that followed us from a basement apartment in 1983. The steam fogs the window, and for a second I see my reflection inside the cloud, an old man people mistake for furniture. The cloud fades. The face remains. I take one sip and decide something I can live with. I won't argue in kitchens or hallways. I will speak in ledgers, and, when the room is full enough for everyone to hear, in Mandarin. Thanksgiving crept in with wet wind and the smell of rain-soaked pine, the kind of weather that makes the sky sit heavy on the roof. I spent the morning alone, shuffling between the kettle and the window, watching the neighbor's flag cling to its pole. I hadn't heard a word from Daniel in a week, not since I'd misunderstood Mei-Lin's little joke. She'd gone silent too, no smiles, no good mornings, just polite taps of her shoes past my door. On November 26th, a text from Daniel broke the stillness. "Dad, May says you've been confused lately. Don't stress yourself. Maybe I should handle the HOA and utilities from now on. Confused. That was the word that cut deeper than burden. I looked at the HOA letter that had arrived that morning. 175 due for a new lobby camera. Nothing confusing about it. I had the notice, the envelope, the date. I could pay it myself. But their tone told me what they were building, a paper wall of concern. Once you're labeled forgetful, everything you say becomes suspect, and everything they take becomes help. That night I sat through dinner like a guest in my own home. The oven timer dinged. No one moved. Daniel asked if I'd remembered to take my pills, as if I were a child. Malin smiled and said softly, "He has his system." She meant the notebook. I watched her wipe the counter in small, precise circles, never looking up. The silence stretched like elastic until it almost sang. Later, a folded sheet slid under my door. I thought it was an apology. It was the building's incident log, initialed by the front desk clerk. Frequent tense discussions in Unit 4B, possible noise complaints. It wasn't against me, but I knew whose voice had requested it. Mrs. Reynolds, the neighbor, probably trying to help in her own way. I added it to the notebook anyway. Evidence doesn't care about intent. The next day, the ache in my chest returned, the kind that feels like you're swallowing stones. I called my old supplier, Mr. Zhao, who still ran the little grocery on Jackson Street. I hadn't spoken to him in years. He laughed when he heard my voice. "Lao Pengyo, ni hai zai Seattle." Old friend, still in Seattle? "Still here," I said. But things have changed. I told him what happened in the hallway, the words Mei Lin used. He grew quiet. "Lei Zui isn't a light word," he said. "It means dead weight, the thing you cut loose to keep the ship from sinking." I sat in silence for a moment. Then he added gently, "You're not a burden, Ahmed. You're an elder. Don't let them rewrite you." That night I cried, not the cinematic kind, but the old man kind, where your shoulders shake but your eyes stay dry. I missed my wife's voice. She'd been the practical one, the one who read every receipt before signing, who made me keep 3 copies of every bill. Maybe she'd known that one day I'd need proof not for taxes, but for dignity. On December 1st, I pulled out my thick manila folder. Deed, closing statement, insurance, the $2,800 household expense Mei Lin had written in my name. I took the bus downtown to attorney Ruth Delgado, an elder law specialist my CPA had once mentioned. Her office smelled like lemon polish and quiet authority. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she tapped her pen against her notepad. "You've already done the hard part," she said. "Oh, what's that?" I asked. "You kept records." She explained what I could do: file a transfer on death deed to protect the condo, create a care agreement spelling out duties and payments, and freeze any joint account that didn't have safeguards. "No fights, no shouting," she said. "We make your boundaries legal." I told her about the insult in Mandarin. She smiled faintly. "Words are wind," she said, "but paper has teeth." By the time I left her office, the city had gone dark and wet again. Christmas lights blurred in the drizzle like false promises. I carried the manila folder under my coat, like it was my last bit of armor. Back home, I found Daniel in the kitchen, scrolling on his phone. "Dad, May thinks you've been overworked. Maybe we can take over your errands next month." "No," I said softly. "I've already spoken to someone." "A doctor?" he asked. "A lawyer," he blinked, confused. Malin paused mid-slice over a cutting board, her hand tightening around the knife handle. For the first time, she didn't smile. I went to my room and laid out everything on the bed, the deed, the bills, the medicine bottles, my life in papers. I thought about how easily trust turns into paperwork once you start losing your place in your own house. And at midnight, I wrote one more note in the spiral. If they think I'm weak, they'll underestimate the paperwork. The kettle hissed behind me, small and steady. I didn't cry again. I didn't have to. Collapse had already found its floor. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, pressed my palm flat over the manila folder, and whispered to my wife's memory, "All right, love. I'll keep the receipts." And that's how revenge began, not with fury, but with filing. It started small, a habit born from the shopkeeper years. Balance the till, count the slips, keep your proof. Only this time, the shop was my life. On December 3rd, another $12,800 bill appeared on the counter. Same ink, same loops in the 8, but this one carried a single new word on top: urgent. I photographed it under the kitchen light, timestamp visible, and slid it into the back of my spiral notebook beside the first one. The edges of those two papers felt like bookends around a story I hadn't finished writing. I called Mr. Ortega, my CPA of 15 years. "Ahmed," he said, his voice steady as always, "you never call unless there's smoke." I told him everything. The bills, the whispers, the talk of confusion. I heard his chair creak on the other end. "You keep every statement." "Everyone since 1995, I said. "Good," he replied. "Bring the last 3 months of your bank records. If it's yours, we'll prove it. If it's not, we'll show it." On December 6th, Ortega circled numbers in red ink on his desk. A $600 ATM withdrawal on November 12, another $2,800 on deck 3, and the retail $200 Venmo transfer tagged household. "Your name's attached to all of them," he said. "Joint account?" I nodded. He sighed. "We'll fix that." He printed everything on thick paper, clipped it, and handed me a folder. "Ahmed," he said, "your son loves you, but love and oversight don't mix. Separate them before one disappears." I nodded. Love, I realized, has a way of blurring the signature lines. In the laundry room that evening, the dryers hummed like machinery from my old store. Mrs. Reynolds was folding towels with military precision. "I've seen you walking with your notebook," she said. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, then smiled. "Just keeping track." She lowered her voice. "If you ever need dates or times, like when they come and go, I've got notes. Not taking sides, just observant." I thanked her. A neighbor's memory is a witness without paperwork. A few days later, I walked down to Jackson Street, the part of town where my old life still breathed through neon. The red signs, the smell of sesame oil and rain on concrete. I stepped into Hua's gift shop, a place I used to deliver rice to decades ago. The same counter, same faded Lucky Cat waving behind glass. I bought 2 red envelopes and a silk-covered gift box decorated with gold thread. The owner tucked in a proverb card I hadn't seen in years: "Yichirenjidao." And Yichirenjishin used their own method to return to them. I didn't know then how literal it would become. Back home, I met with Attorney Delgado again. She smiled when I laid Ortega's folder on her desk. "We're halfway there," she said. "Now we formalize it." She drew up a care agreement, clear, calm, and utterly lawful. Weekly assistance, medication, meals, errands. Compensation, $150 per week upon signed checklist. No access to title, HOA, or banking authority. If any condition failed, the agreement dissolved. She stapled it neatly. "This," she said, "is your wall." Then she pulled a second form from her drawer, a transfer on death deed, and had me list my niece in Spokane as beneficiary. "The condo will go directly to her," she explained. "Not your son, not his wife. It can't be sold, borrowed against, or seized." She smiled. Quiet justice, Ahmed. I left her office lighter than I'd felt in months. Rain tapped my shoulders, soft but rhythmic. For the first time, I walked without looking over my shoulder. That night, Mei Lin came home with groceries and that same bright voice. "Daniel says you met a lawyer?" I smiled. "We're reviewing my taxes." She tilted her head. "You trust people too easily." I stirred my tea. I used to. When she went to bed, I labeled a new section in my notebook, Spring Festival. Underneath, I wrote 2 red envelopes, silk box, proverb, lunar New Year dinner. February 3rd, Golden Dragon Reservation, under Daniel's name. That reservation was the seed, a stage dressed in red lanterns and polite smiles. The place I'd let my Mandarin do the heavy lifting. Before sleeping, I practiced the phrase Mr. Zhao had taught me years ago for calm confrontation. "Wabushalei, I am not a burden." I repeated it until my accent softened, until my breath matched the rhythm. The more they underestimated me, the quieter I became. Quiet, after all, is the most dangerous sound in a house built on guilt. On December 10th, I paid the HOA assessment myself, $175, because letting a clerk tell me I'd forgotten felt worse than writing a check. I sat at my kitchen table with the envelope. the lamplight making the ink look almost ceremonial, and I photographed the cleared transaction on my phone. The screenshot showed the confirmation number and the time, 7:42 p.m. I sent it to Ortega with one line, "Receipt attached." He replied with a short thumbs-up emoji and the words, "Good. Paper speaks. I didn't make a scene." I didn't shout. My moves were small and quiet, like dropping pebbles into a pond and waiting for ripples. On December 12th, Attorney Delgado sent a letter, not confrontational, not dramatic, just tidy and precise, to Daniel and Mei Lin. It said plainly that any claim against Mr. Khan's finances must be accompanied by signed receipts and a matching checklist per the proposed care agreement. It offered a transitional schedule, signed duties, weekly compensation, and an acknowledgement that the condo title would remain outside the scope of household reimbursements. I watched Mei Lin's expression when Daniel opened the email at the dinner table. Her smile tightened, and for the first time I saw impatience like a crack. December 17th was the day I went to the bank with Ortega. There's a small comfort in the mechanical hum of a branch, the click of keyboards, the rustle of stamped paper. Ortega set a folder between us with 3 months of my statements clipped together. "We'll put a safeguard on the joint account," he said. "2 signatures for anything over $200, text alerts to you and me for withdrawals, and daily balance emails to your address." The bank officer printed the new policy and ran a blue stamp across the top. I remember the stamp's weight in my hand, the way official things feel heavier once they're marked. The teller slid the printed form across and signed with a flourish. I ran my finger along the edge of the paper like someone might along the spine of a book. Ownership. When I brought the news home, Mei Lin tilted her head and said, "You don't need to make things difficult for us." Daniel looked uncertain between his mother's ghost memory and his wife's smile. "We're only trying to help," he said. I placed the bank form on the table and tapped the blue stamp for emphasis. "This isn't difficulty," I said. "It's accounting. I changed the keypad code for the building door on January 16th through management. They logged it. Code change authorized by Unit Owner 4B on 20/25/01/16 at 10:05 a.m. I didn't mention it to anyone. A new code meant I controlled who walked in after midnight and who could reach my laundry basket when I wasn't watching. Small controls, but important ones. I kept collecting receipts, screenshots, a Venmo page with Mei Lin's requests, and the ATM withdrawals Ortega had circled. I printed the screen of the attempted $2,800 withdrawal that had been denied because of the new dual signature rule. The bank's error message read, "Withdrawal declined. Dual authorization required." I slipped that printout into the manila folder next to the HOA receipt. Evidence, when stacked, shines like a blade's edge. There was theater in an unexpected place, too. On December 20th, I accepted an invitation to a neighbor's holiday tea, an hour of small talk and cookie trays. I sat near the door and listened. Mei Lin moved through the room like someone practiced at crowd. She asked a question about my medication, loud enough for the nearest circle to hear. One of the neighbors leaned in later and told me, "We all worry about each other in a building like this." It sounded neighborly, but I heard it through a new filter. Caution disguised as concern. Mrs. Reynolds left me a note that evening. "If you want, I can keep a log of comings and goings." She underlined the word keep twice. I wrote neighbor log in my spiral and drew a small square beside it. I like squares. They hold things. I scheduled a meeting with Delgado again on December 28th. We finalized the care agreement, with specifics, medication checks every Tuesday and Friday, meal prep twice weekly, a signed checklist each visit, and payment only upon signature. The clause that mattered most, no access to title or HOA control, stared up at me in bold. Delgado said we don't need to trap them. We just need to make assistance conditional and visible. She stapled a copy for me with a neat red staple. I tucked it into the folder. By January, the ledger had become its own muscle. I logged every interaction, dates I'd seen Mei Lin at the supermarket, the time Daniel's car idled in front of the building, The nights the lights in their units stayed on until 2 a.m. I printed the Golden Dragon confirmation for February 3rd, the reservation under Daniel's name, and placed it on top of the manila stack. The place was red inside, full of guests and lanterns. Reservations are simple things, but they make a good theater. I smiled when I put it on the pile. I liked the idea of speaking where people were watching. I didn't boast to anyone about what I was doing. I let the paperwork accumulate like a tide. Each stamped paper, each printed screenshot was a small sentence in the story I intended to tell. I practiced the Mandarin phrase quietly in the dark sometimes. Wobushuledre, I am not a burden, not as a threat, but as a claim. The method was gentle and legal. Change the account rules, formalize the agreement, gather witness statements, document every penny. No drama, no illegal tricks, just procedures that bind people to their promises. The day I set the dual signature rule in the bank, I slept the sleep of someone who had, at last, turned his hands from shaking to steady. I closed the folder, set it on the nightstand, and wrote in the spiral, "Paper is the polite kind of justice." Then I folded the page over and slept, thinking of red lanterns and the sound of chopsticks in a crowded room. The next act would be about pressure, how them noticing the rules would change their behavior, and how I would let them notice at the right time. After Christmas, Seattle turned the color of wet metal. January 2nd came with a sky so low it brushed the rooftops. I brewed my morning tea and heard Daniel's text ping before the kettle even clicked off. "Dad, May feels you're policing her. Maybe we can ease up a bit." I smiled at the word policing. I poured the tea, snapped a photo of the checklist on the counter, blank for the third week, and texted it back with a caption, "No signatures. No services rendered." That afternoon, a new Venmo request appeared, $200, household supplies. Ortega flagged it within the hour. The same handwriting, the same casual greed. Delgado's email arrived a day later, polite and merciless. "Requests inconsistent with the care agreement will be denied." She CC'd Daniel. Politeness in writing, power in ink. Maylin responded in her own way. She began holding little tea sessions in the building lounge, offering neighbors almond cookies and the charm of a dutiful daughter-in-law. She switched back to Mandarin around me, assuming language was still her private room. I let her think so. On January 9th, I watched her slip a bank envelope into Daniel's coat as he left for work. I noted the time, 7:18 a.m., and jotted it down beside the word transfer. That night, Ortega called, attempted withdrawal, fund 200, denied. Dual signature rule working. He sounded almost proud, like a teacher whose student finally showed his work. I thanked him and added a red tick beside the date in my spiral. The next few days stretched taut as string. Daniel grew quieter at meals, caught between two versions of me. The helpless father Mei Lin described, and the man keeping receipts with military precision. He would start to say something, then swallow it back. Once he asked, "Dad, you really think she's trying to take your money?" I answered gently, "I don't think, son." I count. On January 15th, the banker left me a voicemail. Another $2,800 attempt. Denied, 2 signatures required. The same amount as November as December. Patterns are a kind of confession. I saved the message, dated it, and wrote beneath it in the spiral, "Third strike." They don't learn arithmetic. That evening I stepped onto the balcony. Their apartment above hummed with laughter, thin, brittle laughter that tried to sound ordinary. Then through the vent, her voice, "After Lunar New Year, we'll convince him to move in with us. Easier to help him. And handle things." She said help in English, sweet and sharp. I turned off my balcony light and listened to the silence that followed, the long pause of someone plotting logistics, not kindness. When I went back inside, I cooked lentils and wrote Daniel a note. "Eat warm. Think slowly." I left it on his plate. He didn't respond, but the next morning he took the note to work, folded in his wallet. On January 20th, I met Mr. Zhao for tea on Jackson Street. We sat by the window where the condensation ran in threads. I told him about the insult, the dinner plans, the new pattern. He listened, nodding. "Lei Jue," he said, "isn't only burden. It means weight that drags others down. Some people push others underwater so they can float higher. He leaned forward. Don't argue. Show her the mirror. I smiled. That's the plan. The Golden Dragon reservation glowed in my notebook like a red heartbeat. 8 guests, 2 red envelopes, a silk box. Everything was in motion. The proverb card I'd bought weeks ago sat taped to the inside cover. Yi Qi Ren Zhi Dao. Hanzi Qi Ren Zhi Shen used their own method to return to them. On January 25th, Mei Lin printed the invitation cards on glossy paper. She showed one to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. We'll make it big this year, she said. Everyone will see what family harmony looks like. Indeed, I answered. Everyone will see. That night, I took the manila folder from the drawer and flipped through it. HOA receipt. Bank policies, care agreement, denied transactions, checklist logs, all the quiet artillery of boundaries. I slid a new note in the front. Feb 3, Golden Dragon, 7 p.m., final inventory of truth. The city outside hissed with rain. I felt no anger now, only focus. Justice, I'd learned, doesn't need heat. It needs documentation and timing. I closed the spiral and whispered the line I'd practiced for weeks. Wo bushi le jui. I am not a burden. I am the ledger you ignored. And soon I'd balance it in public. February 3rd. Seattle's Chinatown shimmered under wet lantern light, red paper bleeding into the puddles. I arrived 10 minutes early at Golden Dragon Restaurant, the folder tucked inside my coat like a second spine. The hostess led me to the private room Daniel had booked, the one I'd quietly reserved weeks before. 8 chairs, a round table, and walls dressed in crimson silk. Steam ghosted from twin hot pots already bubbling. The smell of ginger and soy thick in the air. The guests began drifting in. Mei Lin's cousins, her aunt and uncle from Bellevue, Daniel trailing behind with his nervous smile. She wore a silk cheongsam the color of pomegranate seeds, her hair pinned with gold combs. She looked like a queen expecting applause. Baba, sit here, Daniel said, pointing to a chair by the door. I glanced at the place cards. She'd seated me farthest from the head. I quietly switched mine with his before anyone noticed. Years in retail teach you timing. Sleight of hand belongs to patient men. The chatter rose with the scent of sesame oil. Toasts were made. To family, someone called. Glasses clinked. My teacup stayed untouched. I watched the door's reflection in the polished wood table and waited. When the sea base arrived, Mei Lin lifted her glass. We're grateful, she said in English for my benefit, then in Mandarin for everyone else, for our elder who trusts us with everything he has. A few polite laughs. I saw Daniel's eyes drop. Even he heard the barb this time. The server set a small porcelain plate in front of me. On it lay a gold-foil chocolate coin, bright and childish. Her cousin grinned. Maybe Uncle Ahmed will sign something sweet tonight, he said in Mandarin. Laughter again. Too loud, too long. I set down my chopsticks. The old warehouse calm came over me. The same stillness that helped me lift 50-pound rice sacks without shaking. I spoke in Mandarin, clear, deliberate, the dialect of my younger self. Ni shuo de dui, I began. Tonight I will sign something, but not what you think. The room went still. The waiter froze mid-step. I switched to English for the cousins who didn't understand. You've all been told I'm forgetful, maybe even foolish. Let me clarify something. I reached into my coat and placed 2 red envelopes on the Lazy Susan, the silk gift box beside them. Inside these, I said, are truths, written, stamped, and signed. Mei Lin laughed softly. Baba, not now. I continued in Mandarin, louder now, steady as rainfall. Last November, you called me Lei Zhui, dead weight. You plotted to push me into signing over my condo. Every bill, every withdrawal, every urgent note, you wrote them yourself. I didn't argue. I kept receipts. Gasps flickered around the table. Daniel's fork paused halfway to his mouth. I opened the first envelope and handed it to him. Here, son. This is a copy of the transfer on death deed. The condo passes directly to your cousin Sarah in Spokane when I die. Not before. Until then, it's mine, legally untouchable. He unfolded the document. His face changed. Confusion first, then relief, then shame. I slid the second envelope toward Mei Lin. "Yours contains the ledger," I said. "Withdrawals attempted since November 12th. $600, $2,800, $200. Each denied or unsupported by a checklist you refused to sign. Ortega CPA verified them. Delgado Law notarized them." She blinked. "You went through our account?" "Our account?" I echoed. "You mean my account, the one my wife and I built with 40 years of work." "I didn't touch it. I simply locked the door." Her cousin leaned over her shoulder, whispering. The color drained from her cheeks. You embarrassed me in front of my family," she hissed in Mandarin. I said quietly, "No, you embarrassed yourself in front of proof." Daniel looked from me to her. "May, tell me you didn't," she snapped. "They were family expenses." "Then why no receipts?" I asked. I lifted the silk box lid. Inside lay the care agreement, crisp and stapled, and the checklist. 3 blank weeks labeled unpaid, no services rendered. I turned the paper toward the light, so the gold dragon on the wall reflected across its surface. "This," I said, "is what family help looks like when it's honest." Her aunt coughed into the silence. "Maybe we should—" I raised a hand. "Please, let her finish what she started." Mei Lin stood trembling. "You think this makes you powerful?" I met her gaze. "No, it makes me accurate." Then I spoke one more sentence, the one I'd practiced in the dark. "Wo bushe lei jui, I am not a burden." The words landed like a gavel. For a moment, even the steam stopped moving. Mr. Zhao, who had come quietly and sat near the door, smiled faintly. "Language," he murmured, "is proof." Daniel put down his chopsticks and looked at his wife. "You told me Dad was losing his mind," he said. "You lied," she stammered. "I was protecting us." He shook his head. "From what? Accountability?" The room seemed smaller suddenly, the red lanterns pulsing like hearts under pressure. I gathered the papers back into the folder, closed it, and stood. "Dinner's paid for," I said in English. "Consider it my last family contribution." As I turned toward the door, Mei Lin's aunt reached out. "Elder Khan," she said gently, "in our culture, keeping clear ledgers is honorable." I nodded. Then tonight was an honor. Outside, the drizzle had turned to steady rain. I could see the restaurant's name reflected upside down in the puddles, Golden Dragon, glowing and distorted. Daniel followed me out, his steps quick. "Dad," he said, voice rough, "I didn't know." "I know," I answered. "Now you do." He looked back at the door, then at me. "What happens next?" "Next," I said, "paper finishes what words started." We walked in silence to the car. The city's neon smeared across the windshield as he drove. When we reached my building, he turned off the engine but didn't move. "She's going to hate you for this," he said. I smiled. "Maybe, but she'll respect the math." Before he left, I handed him a folded note. "I'll give this to her tomorrow." "What is it?" "A translation of the proverb inside the gift box," I said. "Let her understand what I did tonight." He nodded slowly. Rain tapped against the roof like a metronome, counting down change. Inside my condo, I hung my coat, opened the notebook, and wrote, "Feb 3, Golden Dragon, balance achieved, interest pending." I placed the folder beside it and whispered to the empty room, "Happy New Year, my love. The house is still ours." The rain didn't stop that night. It followed me home like a shadow I'd earned. I placed the folder on the table, still warm from the restaurant lights, and made myself a cup of tea. The clock read 11:43 p.m., but my heart hadn't caught up to the hour. My hands didn't tremble anymore. They just felt steady, like they finally had something to do besides shake. At dawn, the phone rang. Daniel's voice cracked through the static. She left, packed a bag around midnight. Her aunt drove her to Bellevue. I stirred my tea. "That's good," I said. "Distance gives people perspective." He was quiet for a long time. Then softly, "Dad, you were right. I should have paid more attention." "Attention is expensive," I said, "but at least you're paying now." Later that morning, Mrs. Reynolds knocked with her usual decisiveness. She carried a tray of muffins and the kind of smile that says, "I heard everything." "You made the right kind of noise," she whispered. I chuckled. "All paper, no shouting." She handed me a slip of paper, a copy of the building's January incident log she'd requested. just in case they try to say you were disruptive. The entry read simply, Feb 3, 9 p.m., noise complaint retracted. Proof that silence can win louder than noise. By midday, I met Ortega at the bank. He adjusted his glasses, laid out the fresh statement, attempted withdrawals since John 15, denied. Balance intact, 18,400. He slid it across the desk. All clean. You've weathered it. I told him about the dinner, how I'd quoted the proverb in Mandarin. He grinned. You played the long game, Ahmed. You didn't humiliate her, you audited her. We laughed quietly. Then Ortega pulled a small envelope from his jacket. Your lawyer sent this over. Inside was Delgado's letter, dry, factual, perfect. She'd filed a notice of record attaching the care agreement and confirming the transfer on death deed had been logged with the county. Any coercion or attempt to alter title, the letter said, will trigger an immediate protective filing. The words felt heavier than the law itself, because they were mine. Daniel came by that evening. His eyes were rimmed red but clear. He sat across from me at the kitchen table where everything had started. The same light, the same spiral notebook between us. She says you embarrassed her, he said quietly. I showed her numbers, I replied. Numbers embarrass no one who tells the truth. She wants to apologize. Then she can start by signing her first checklist. He nodded, eyes wet, ashamed, grateful all at once. He pulled out a small envelope, the one I'd given him to pass on. She read your proverb, he said. Didn't understand it at first. Then she called her aunt to translate. I smiled. Good. Understanding takes work. Over the next week, the air around me changed. No more late-night knocks. No more misplaced pill bottles. The hallway smelled like lemon cleaner instead of tension. On February 5th, Delgado phoned. We're filing a quiet confirmation, she said. It's routine, but it makes your condo and accounts fully insulated. Meaning? I asked. Meaning even if she tried to challenge, the ledger wins. On February 7th, Daniel and I sat at the same bank desk as before. He signed a voluntary removal from the emergency account. We opened a new one in his name alone. I handed him $300 in cash, the amount owed for errands he'd personally done. He frowned. Dad, you don't have to. I do, I said. Fairness is a habit. When we got back home, I cooked salmon the way his mother used to, lemon, pepper, a little butter. He ate quietly. She called me from her aunt's, he said. She's realizing what she did. She will, I said. People usually do once the mirror's not distorted by money. On February 8th, Mrs. Reynolds slipped another note under my door. No unusual noise. All calm, I smiled. A sentence like that feels like music when you've lived in weeks of tension. I filed it behind the bank statements. That weekend, I found a text message from Mei Lin, short, formal. I will honor the care agreement if still possible. No emojis, no excuses, just an acceptance of the rules she once mocked. I replied, possible and preferred. The following Friday, she came by to collect her first checklist. She wore simple clothes, no makeup, eyes tired. She filled in every line, medication check, grocery delivery, cleaning. When she handed it to me, her fingers trembled. I signed, dated, and handed her $150 cash. Thank you, I said, and see? No arguments, just clarity. She nodded. Clarity, she echoed softly. When she left, the condo felt still again, peaceful, not empty. The radiator clicked like applause. The manila folder on the shelf looked thinner now. Most of its work was done. The ledger had turned from weapon to monument. On February 10th, Daniel stopped by with takeout and 2 beers. To clean slates, he said, raising his can. I clinked mine lightly. To signed checklists, he laughed. You really think like an accountant. Shopkeepers and accountants, I said, both survive by counting truth. Later, as he left, he paused at the door. She'll come around, Dad. She's embarrassed, but she's not evil. I know, I said. Embarrassment is the down payment on change. That night, I opened the spiral notebook one last time under the lamp's golden cone and wrote, Paper kept peace. Boundaries kept love. I didn't win. I balanced. The next morning, I delivered a copy of Delgado's notice to the HOA office and smiled at the clerk. Just housekeeping, I said. Everything all right, Mr. Khan? everything accounted for. When I got home, I made breakfast and thought about how revenge had never felt so quiet, so procedural. It didn't need fireworks or shouting matches. It just needed the courage to be precise. The same language that once cut me, Mandarin, had become the bridge that saved me. Words had weight. Paper had teeth. Justice, it turned out, had both. February 11th. The rain finally stopped. The sky over Ballard looked washed clean, pale as an eggshell. For the first time in months, I opened the window without checking who might be listening. The air smelled of pine and cold sea wind, and of something new, freedom. That morning, my lawyer Ruth Delgado called. "Ahmed, everything's finalized," she said. "The care agreement's now notarized, and the transfer on death deed is recorded. The county clerk logged it at 9:47 a.m. today." She paused, then added with a smile in her voice, "You're untouchable now. No one can touch your home, your accounts, or your peace without your signature." I looked around my condo, the polished counter, the framed photo of my wife, holding a grocery list like a flag, the tidy rows of receipts. Everything was in its place, just as she'd liked. I whispered, "You'd be proud of the balance sheet, love." Then I sat down and opened my ledger. The final page was blank, except for one note I'd written weeks ago. "Justice, boundaries in motion." Today, I drew a line beneath it. Delgado's letter arrived that afternoon. Embossed, official, the kind of paper that smells like authority. It confirmed that all transfers were locked, all accounts dual signature protected, and any coercive attempts would trigger automatic legal review. A shield of documentation, she'd called it. I slipped it into the manila folder and closed it for the last time. That folder had been my weapon, my confession, and my armor. The next day, Ortega stopped by for tea. He never drank sugar, but he accepted one cube this time, saying, "A little sweetness won't hurt." He reviewed the bank printout, all clean. "All quiet, you know," he said. "Most people your age give up when family gets complicated. You didn't." "I didn't fight them," I replied. "I just balanced the math," he laughed. "Balance is its own kind of justice." We sat in silence a while, watching the late light pool on the table. The manila folder lay between us like a retired soldier. I could almost hear it exhale. On February 15th, the HOA board sent me a notice thanking me for prompt communication and transparency. I smiled. A bureaucratic thank you letter had never felt so satisfying. Even bureaucracy, I realized, respected order. That weekend, Daniel came by with groceries. Actual groceries, not bills disguised as them. He'd double-bagged everything neatly. Salmon, rice, green onions, my favorite brand of tea. He handed me a small envelope. "It's from Mei Lin," he said. Inside was a short letter, handwritten. "Mr. Khan, I was wrong. I let pride make me cruel. I will honor the agreement and your boundaries. I've started a bookkeeping course. Maybe one day I'll understand why you smiled that night." There was no signature flourish, no apology stamp, just her plain handwriting. That was enough. When she came by the following week, she didn't look like the woman who once ran my kitchen. She looked smaller, human, tired. She placed the signed checklist on the counter. Every line was filled, groceries done, meds sorted, trash out. I signed her pay stub, $150, and slid it back across the counter. She hesitated, then said, "Boundaries make peace." I nodded. "Yes, and peace makes family possible." Later that day, I met Delgado to close out the legal file. She asked if I wanted to pursue a civil complaint for attempted financial coercion. I shook my head. "No need," I said. "The law's already done its work," she smiled. "You're one of the rare ones who wants justice, not revenge," I corrected her gently. "They're the same thing when done on paper." That night I took a walk around the block. The windows of the restaurant across the street glowed red from the lanterns still hanging after Lunar New Year. Couples laughed over noodles. Someone played a soft Mandarin ballad through a speaker. For the first time, the language didn't sting. It sounded like closure. When I got home, I brewed a last cup of tea, opened the window again, and said out loud, "You didn't lose me. You gave me away. I just learned how to return myself." The city hummed below me. The ledger was closed. The numbers balanced. Justice wasn't thunder or applause. It was the quiet click of a pen, signing your own name on your own terms. A week after the papers were filed, I woke to quiet. No phone vibrating at dawn, no polite tapping at the door. Just the kettle's slow whistle and the rain's soft applause against the window. It's funny how victory doesn't sound like fireworks. It sounds like your own breath not catching anymore. I sat at the kitchen table with my spiral notebook, the same one that had carried my wife's grocery lists, my pain, and eventually, my plan. I flipped through the pages, past the numbers, the bank slips, the Mandarin phrases scrawled in ink that bled a little when I cried. I stopped at the first page where I'd written Jijiang, Naixin, Bianjai, ledger, patience, boundaries. The trinity that saved me. I underlined each word again, slowly, as though blessing them. There's something you learn when you outlive your pride. Revenge doesn't have to burn. It can calculate. When I was younger, I thought dignity meant silence. I was wrong. Dignity, I've learned, is speaking calmly on paper with dates, amounts, and signatures. It's refusing to shout because you've already documented the truth. My father used to tell me, if you can count, you can't be cheated. He meant money. I didn't realize until this winter that he also meant love. When you stop counting how many times you've forgiven someone, you start losing yourself. I thought about the younger version of me, the man who built a small shop on Jackson Street, who learned Mandarin to negotiate with vendors, who smiled through broken English and broken backs. That man came back when Mei Lin called me Lei Zhui. He'd been waiting under layers of politeness, under years of being dad and sir. I think he was proud of me for finally standing up without raising my voice. In the evenings, I'd walk down to the pier. The gulls screamed, the ferry horns echoed, and the air carried that damp Seattle salt that makes old bones ache. I'd watch the reflections of the neon signs ripple in the puddles and think about all the people my age who get written out of their own lives, erased by paperwork they don't understand or by kindness that comes with conditions. So if you're listening to this and you're over 60 and someone keeps telling you you're confused, don't argue. Don't fight. Just document. Keep every receipt, every bill, every text. Because paper, not shouting, keeps you human in a world that forgets you once built it. A few days later, Daniel dropped by after work. He was calmer now, humbler. He placed a photo on the table, a picture of me and his mother standing in front of the old shop, smiling under a sun-bleached awning. "I found this in your drawer," he said. I nodded. "Your mother kept everything, even the receipts for happiness." He smiled. "She'd have liked what you did. She'd have preferred I never had to," I said, half laughing. He looked around the condo, the clean counters, the thick curtains, the shelf where the manila folder used to be. "It's peaceful here now," he said. "Yes," I replied. Peace has a paper trail. That night I wrote one last entry in the notebook. Love is patient but not blind. Forgiveness is kind but not free. Respect is earned and sometimes invoiced. I closed it and placed it inside the drawer where my wife's will still rests. I felt her there, not as a ghost, but as a balance carried forward. Every ledger, even love, needs to close with something left over. For me, that leftover was self-respect. When the kettle clicked off, I poured the last of the tea and whispered, "You didn't lose me. You gave me away." I just returned myself with interest. The steam rose between me and the window, twisting like a spirit. I smiled. Justice, it turns out, has no accent. It just speaks fluently in truth. By March, the cherry blossoms had begun to bloom along Market Street. Seattle looked softer, washed pink and white like a memory that finally stopped hurting. The air had that faint sugar scent of new beginnings. One morning, I opened the door to find a small container of congee on my mat, still warm, steam rising through the plastic lid. A yellow post-it stuck to the top read, "For strength." I stood there for a long moment, feeling the quiet between us like a bridge, slowly rebuilt. The last time she left something at my door, it was a bill. This time it was food. I took it inside, sat at the table, and ate every spoonful. Sometimes healing doesn't come in words. It comes in rice porridge and humility. Later that week, she knocked softly. I opened the door, and she looked different. No heavy makeup, no sharp perfume, no armor. Just a young woman holding a clipboard. "May I continue under the checklist?" she asked. Her voice trembled a little. I nodded. "You may." We began again quietly. Tuesdays for medication, Fridays for groceries. At the end of each visit, she'd hand me the completed sheet and I'd hand her $150, not out of charity, but contract. And each time we both smiled a little easier. By April, the system ran itself like a metronome. Mr. Ortega came by one afternoon, curious. "Everything stable?" he asked. I showed him the folder, still tidy, still guarded, but rarely opened now. "Perfect," he said. "You've done what most people can't. You've turned family chaos into a balanced account." "Justice isn't punishment," I replied. "It's math that remembers emotion," he laughed. "You should teach a class." At the Golden Dragon, the manager recognized me one evening while I was out for tea with Mr. Zhao. "Ah, the man with the red envelopes," he said with a grin. "Your story, very popular among our staff. We called it the Dinner of Balance." I smiled. "Tell them the ending was peace." He nodded. "The best kind." When I returned home that night, Daniel was waiting outside the building. He looked lighter, like a man who had shed someone else's guilt. "She's trying," he said. "I think she really understands now." "I know," I said. "Understanding always starts late, but it counts double when it arrives." He laughed. "You always turn life into numbers." "I ran a shop too long not to," I said. Before leaving, he handed me a small photo frame. Inside was a picture of him and Mei Lin in the kitchen, smiling, sleeves rolled up, a mixing bowl between them. "She's learning to make your lemon cake," he said. "Your mother's recipe." I traced the frame's edge and nodded. "Then she's learning forgiveness, too." By May, the city had turned bright and warm. I began walking every morning, carrying only my phone and my small spiral notebook, empty now except for one new entry I wrote in careful ink. "Peace is not the absence of betrayal. It's the record of lessons kept visible." On Qingming, the Chinese tomb-sweeping day, Mei Lin surprised me again. She knocked gently, holding a small red envelope. "For your wife," she said. I opened it. Inside was a folded paper with my own handwriting copied neatly: Jijiang, Naixin, Bianjai, ledger, patience, boundaries. She had rewritten the words I'd once used to defend myself. "I wanted to learn them properly," she said in halting Mandarin. Then switching to Urdu, she'd clearly practiced, "Up thik hain. Are you well?" I smiled, answering in her language first, then mine.
我很好.
"Mei thikun. I am well." We both laughed at the mixture. That evening, I took out my wife's old recipe card for lemon cake and placed it on the counter. When Mei Lin arrived for her Friday shift, I handed it to her. "This," I said, "is the final thing that belonged to her. Take care of it." She looked startled. "You trust me?" I nodded. Trust is also an agreement, just unwritten. As she left, she turned at the door. "Thank you for teaching me boundaries." I smiled. "Thank you for teaching me patience." When the door closed, I sat at the same table where it had all begun, the same chair, the same light, the same spiral notebook now resting quietly. The manila folder was retired, the ledger balanced, the air still. I poured myself a cup of tea and whispered the line that had carried me through it all. "You didn't lose me. You gave me away. I just learned how to return myself." The rain began again outside, soft, forgiving. Somewhere between the receipts and red envelopes, between the insult and the apology, justice had turned into peace, and peace, as it turns out, speaks fluently in every language, especially the one called respect.